And boom, we should be live now. Good to see you. Sorry I missed everything last week. I fell asleep. Just had a long week. Sometimes you need to sleep. But I realized I woke up at about 11 o'clock and I thought, no, I'm not going to stumble into it. So, yes, it's good to be back. Good to see you all. I've had a well-rested week in spite of all the news. So I guess the main topic for tonight is the same topic for the last 2 weeks, which is the what's going on with COVID-19 or the new coronavirus. I think it's people are slowly getting used to using the proper name for it now. So yes, there are updates on what's happening with that in Japan, and it seems to be happening. But we will see. There is a few other topics. I mean, it's 2 weeks of stuff. I just went through and kind of added what I thought looked interesting. First of all, good to see everybody there in the comments, starting with Tai Nakamura. Great to see you, and thank you for the Facebook anniversary video thing the other day. I quite like that. That was awesome. Good to see you. Sergeant Booker, good to see you. Aruku Skywalker. Aruku Skywalker. Is that Aruku Skywalker? Oh, I see. Walking Skywalker. Kind of makes sense. Okay, well, good to see you. Quinn Rankin, awesome to see you as always. Tokyo 503, great to see you. Who else we got in here? We've got Lysander 45. Good evening from Beijing. Must be interesting being there right now. Who else we got? We got Bald Billet's Boy. Awesome. Sleep? What's that? Indeed, we don't need sleep where we're going. James Kelly. Boom. And double episode. Oh, what was the other episode? I accidentally set up on the wrong channel. That was part of the technical issue that we had in the beginning, but still good to see you all. Good to see everybody here. I will try not to take up the full hour, actually. I don't like to go past midnight this time. I know it's late for a lot of people. Dan H, hey, long time no see you. Good to see you. We've all been busy. It's that time of year, so welcome. Remember, if you ever want me to talk about something specific, or the J-Vlog, good to see you, by the way. If you want to get my attention, if you'd like me to talk about something or ask me a question or just say hello, whatever, at Mark Kiko-sama, especially if you're just joining us, nice to know that people are coming in and nice to say hello to everybody if I can. So, yeah, do that and let us get into the topics. I've actually gotten this down now. I used to be able to do this without memorizing, and I had to go dig up the old algorithms again. My son was interested in it. I just did it like the other day where I did it without having to look at anything. So, yes, that would be pretty boring entertainment, but I could do that at the very end. I might even do some music if I can get through this quickly, but we'll see how we go. Yes, first topic. So this is going back 2 weeks now. So some of these are, I won't spend a lot of time on. This always kind of fascinates me that Japan is a country, of course, one of the very few countries in the world with it, or at least developed countries, civilized countries, first world countries. Mostly just third world countries that have the death penalty. The exceptions are, of course, the United States and Japan. And depending on how you count it, China. I mean, China's kind of second world. It's kind of, partly first world, partly third world. And I think Korea, does Korea have it? Maybe they don't have it, but no, Japan has it. And in spite of having a 99.9% conviction rate and clear issues with its criminal process and the number of convictions based purely on forced confessions and whatnot are kind of alarming. But in spite of all of that, Japanese overwhelmingly support the death penalty. It is an interesting one. I think I've stated my view before that to me it's a no-brainer that it's immoral. And some people talk about the easiest way to oppose it is to say, well, what if they kill someone who's innocent? And of course that would be terrible, but even then it's sort of like, well, just for a state, the idea that the state can under any circumstance murder somebody simply because it costs more to keep them in jail, or because the crime was so terrible that society agrees that it's okay to murder, and again, what you can be murdered for, what the death penalty applies for is almost universally murder. So it's like, you've stolen cookies, so the penalty is having your own cookie stolen. I mean, it's ridiculous. I have all kinds of problems, and it is interesting because each case of execution needs to be actually personally signed off by different Japanese government ministers, and many don't do it. So I think there have been more executions lately because the Minister of Justice is willing to sign. But there you go. In terms of whether Japan is close to moving away from the death penalty, they are not at all. Overwhelming support. So that was interesting. I don't know if some people saw this. This is a wee while ago. Hey, Andrea Morboy, good to see you, and I'm sorry because I know how absurdly late it is for you, but great to have you along here. Glad to hear that the fires have gotten a little bit better, albeit due to floods. I guess that's Australia. I mean, everything can kill you in Australia. Both the heat and the rain. So there you go. I don't know if anybody saw this video. It was an advertisement for Fujifilm, which involved a street photographer going around and being pretty obnoxious, like walking around, shoving the camera in people's faces. And you can tell he was kind of trying to get their reaction on purpose, to catch them like reacting badly, and snapping people reacting like, get that thing out of my face, to a lot of people. And they used this as a TV commercial. And the street photographer talked about, he likes to see, people in their real states being pissed off or something. And a lot of people, so it's very uncomfortable to watch. It's absolutely not typical in Japan, and it got all the way to being made and released, and at least online as an online ad, and people started saying, the hell is this? Is this how you want people to use your cameras? And they pulled the ad. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. It's just really obnoxious. And it's this thing as well, yes, you can take photos in public, street photography, and all these YouTube videos of people who are stopped by police and asserting their right to photography in public spaces and so on. And I think that's correct. It is a right, but it's one of those things that please just don't be a scumbag about it. And I realize it's a fine line, and there are artists who do this, and they kind of try to walk a line, but when there are people who are just being outright, sort of antisocial and frankly, interfering with people, not very good. So, yes, indeed, that was not a good thing, but that was interesting. An interesting topic on the news lately, and this is going to be, it's already more relevant with the increased tourism in Japan, certainly with the Olympics as well. Japan does have a problem, although I wouldn't say, well, it depends on the part of the country, that road manners are particularly bad in Japan, but there are some sort of practices here which don't travel very well, and one of them is zebra crossings that people use to cross the road, where pedestrians have right-of-way and cars have to slow down or stop when people are trying to cross, are treated as pretty optional in Japan. Vast majority of cars do not slow down or stop for people waiting at crossings. NHK actually did a survey on this the other week, and they did surveys and found only 17% of people actually stop at crossings. This leads to a couple of things. I mean, apart from the fact that obviously it's dangerous, that if someone expects to cross and people aren't slowing down, but it also means that one, it's dangerous for tourists, and two, there's actually all of these vidcam sort of things, like for example where a bus and people passing a bus will speed through and will actually hit pedestrians. The fact that NHK is taking it up implies that the police are about to do a bit of a crackdown campaign, but the fact a crackdown is even necessary, like it's already kind of widely considered optional, is kind of a problem. And so there have been a lot more videos and whatnot online lately. Hey Razel, good to see you. A lot more of these lately. And believe in yourself, good to see you. Online, and I'm hoping it will lead to a bit of a crackdown, because it is kind of ridiculous that there are people who do sort of ignore this. In the end of the day, you have to protect the more vulnerable person, right? I mean, everyone has to give way to pedestrians. People have to also be careful of cyclists, because at the end of the day, even if they're wrong and you're right, you're in a big heavy hunk of metal and they're walking, and it's funny how it's one of these things that certainly with people coming in expecting cars to stop and cars are not in the habit of stopping, apart from the fact that it is illegal, it's also actually pretty dangerous, and there are lots of videos of that going around lately. But disappointing bit of the news. It has become kind of, I suppose, fashionable is perhaps an inappropriate way of putting it, but certainly as countries have become more enlightened towards treatment of their indigenous peoples, it has become a thing where in the past many countries really wouldn't have considered having indigenous participation, first world people, First Nations participating in opening ceremonies of events like Olympics. Certainly in the last 20 or 30 years, it's pretty much been a feature of every sort of, especially New World country, but even countries like to, again, the idea of well, the Olympics has changed a lot. Certainly, it's become a bit of a commercial, F-fest, if you like. But certainly, when countries use it as an opportunity to present their culture and their heritage to the world, it's certainly something that most countries are aware. It's kind of a duty to, make sure that you're being as inclusive as possible. And Japan, as with a lot of things, is about 20 or 30 years behind the rest of the sort of the world, the developed world that it claims to be a part of, which it is in most ways, but not in some. Like, for example, starting at crossings. And one is certainly that, only very recently the Japanese parliament just discreetly passed a law, very quietly, just sort of acknowledging formal recognition to Ainu people. And, even this was sort of controversial for a long time. Ainu people, it's not really clear whether they are, in fact, related to the Yayoi and Jomon civilizations that were in Japan before the current Yamato civilization that came from Korea and China about 1500 years ago. But what's clear from the archaeological record is that they have continuously been in Honshu and Hokkaido for longer, both parallel to and longer than modern Japanese people, and indeed they, until at the same time as Americans were moving Native Americans into reservations in the 19th century. The same thing was still happening in Japan. The Ainu were being pushed out to remote reserves in Hokkaido and forced into them. Essentially, these are people that appear to have connections to Siberian and Alaskan people, and indeed there's evidence of trade going back of the sort of greenstone that they have up there. It's super cool, actually. And so again, all of these ideas that when did a white person first discover the Americas, which at the time had tens of millions of people in them. It was arguably discovered by a, by a Japanese. I mean, this is the whole thing as well. There's been continuously people pouring across from the east, from East Asia into America for 10,000 years. But so the Ainu culture thing is super interesting, and it's really shocking actually how unacknowledged it is. It is if you go up to Hokkaido and you go to the places with Ainu, but if you really go anywhere else, other than mentions and books or whatever, it's very, very rare to even see or hear anything. And of course, there aren't large numbers of them. But I was really surprised going to the museum in Ueno and not seeing anything years ago. And it turns out that, as you can see there, they've just decided with the plans for the Olympic opening ceremony that where they were planning to acknowledge Ainu people and include a little bit of an Ainu dance thing. And granted, whether that is, making a commercial show and dance of Ainu culture, or how again, that in itself I'm sure is controversial now, having indigenous shows for people or whatever. But certainly they were going to include them, and then they decided, we can't really, Johnny's wants to dance for an extra 5 minutes. Who the hell knows? But the Ainu got cut. Story of their whole interaction with modern Japan, pretty much. So that is ridiculous. I feel bad that they are building a national museum to Ainu, ironically not in Tokyo, where every other national museum of everything is. So most, it's going to be in Sapporo, which is close to where, the sort of remaining where the final Ainu areas were, and where most Ainu people of Ainu heritage are in Japan. So that's a good thing. If you're ever up in Hokkaido or Sapporo, it would be worth checking out. If you actually get up to Hokkaido, I've only been there once, and I went to Lake Akanko, and that has actually got a little Ainu village and whatnot. And it was actually it was interesting. I mean, again, it can be a little bit seen as a little bit kitschy. It wasn't. I've seen worse. I mean, going to Hawaii and seeing what's happened to the culture there, that was pretty disturbing, to tell you the truth. But it was still nice, and there's actually lots of sort of areas all around there. The whole region was the final holdout of Ainu people in Japan. It's super interesting, and it's worth checking out. But yes, Andrew Moboy, by the way, I'm just seeing comments, by the way, doesn't help that most pedestrians have their eyeballs glued to their phones and walking slower as they get closer to the curb. Certainly, that is true. Also, Andrew Moboy says, she's seen a lot of Aussies risk their lives running across main roads and not a legit pedestrian lane. So certainly people jaywalk, and I think the understanding is that first thing is, as a driver, you do have a responsibility to not run people over, because I realize they can be obnoxious, but at the end of the day, If you bump into each other walking, you're in the same situation. But if you're in a car and they're not, that's true. The walking, looking at iPhones, again, dangerous. And there's posters all over the place in Japan about that. Still doesn't quite mean it's okay to run them over. But, like you're saying as well, there is an expectation of safety. Well, again, you should be looking up. But, that if you're at least going to cross at a crossing, you should be able to get some protection from that, I guess. But, yeah, Dan H., you're surprised that none of the Sekigun were given the death penalty, given some of them were caught, and LDP were funded by the CIA in the 50s and 60s. Tell you the truth, is that the truth, is it? I mean, some of the Sekigun, did some crazy shit as well, fully deserved it. There still are people I believe that there are Sekigun members in North Korea and Lebanon. A few of them have come back just because they got really old. And this is, by the way, one of the many reservations I have about the Japan Communist Party. They seem like lovely people, and I know people. I actually have friends and people that, I really like who are actually members of the Japan Communist Party. If you ever talk to them, they actually seem politically some of the most reasonable people. They're sort of old, they seem to like baking scones, it's all very nice. But, they are the political movement that people like those in the Sekigun. And let's face it, the Sekigun, I think even people who used to be in it seem to acknowledge now was just a little bit too much post-war energy and experimental drugs and ideology at a controversial time with the post-occupation moving into the Vietnam War and everything else. But they went and blew up airports and airplanes, and not just in Japan. I mean, they did create some crazy stuff. So indeed, I agree with you, Dan H. If you're going to have it, I mean, but there you go, they didn't use it for that. I guess the political aspect was also controversial, and perhaps the government was mindful about not wanting to martyr. I mean, the thing about politics in Japan in the 60s and 70s was so completely incomprehensibly different from now. I remember, I've read really interesting conspiracy theories I've not seen supported, but there was that time in the 70s or during the Gulf War, during the Vietnam War, that they had to shut down all the universities in Japan because of the militant unrest that was happening in those. And during that time, one of the things that you've heard about was that the government was pretty determined to break up students organizing and forming groups like Sekigun or whatever through sort of shutting down and reducing the number of student sort of dorms and collective shared living accommodation. And this is one of the reasons, allegedly, that they went into this huge building of all these one-room apartments in Tokyo and making them super affordable in the 70s and 80s, and how Japan transformed from this sort of very, very politically active and social sort of societal minded sort of society to where young people were pretty much very self-contained, and that was actually a political thing. I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly it is true that after the prolonged riots and terrorist groups, I mean, it's hard to think. You look at young people today, it's hard to think of them being politically passionate about anything. And yet, when I was a baby and a bit before, stuff in Japan was, pretty crazy. So as you say, Dan H., it was indeed kind of surprising, but there again, I could imagine that it would have been probably a pretty strong reaction if that had happened. But there we go. More comments. Andrew Mulberry, too bad if you can't stop though. Have I bought tickets to the Olympics? Interesting, Andrew Mulberry. I have bought tickets to Australia during the Olympics. It's going to be summer vacation. And we're just going to try to get out. That said, depending on how things are going with coronavirus and whatnot, I'm not sure if I can get out, and if I can get out, I'm not sure I'll be able to get back in. We'll come to that, but that is right now the plan is to take an extended stay in Australia during that time, and for my son's summer vacation, and that should be pretty cool, so I'm looking forward to that. The J-Vlog, look up the Ainu in Canada. Similar relation, very tragic. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's a similar story wherever you go, and of course I saw the parallels, of course, with Maori and New Zealand as well, so yes, indeed, that was the thing. Just more on, I guess this, on custodial rights in Japan. I mentioned before the problems in Japan. The problems with parental abduction and how Japan is kind of a haven because it doesn't have a custodial family law system, i.e. for divorced parents there's no rights to visitation for the non-custodial parent. And this is a situation which most people outside of Japan are not aware of. Another situation where Japan is really, not in sync with the rest of the world, and of course it serves to cause problems where people are in international marriages outside of Japan, and the Japanese parent, usually the mother, but not always the mother, sometimes it's the father, will grab the kids, take them back to Japan, get sole custody, and basically the other parent's out of luck. They can be completely cut off communication, contact to the kids and everything. Although Japan remedied, at least superficially, the issue by joining the Hague Convention on Parental Aspects of Child Abduction, which allows a mechanism for Japanese courts to enforce overseas custodial orders in Japan, the problem is that Japan doesn't have any enforcement system, let alone any concept of joint custody in the first place. So, practically speaking, it's impossible for them to be able to enforce these orders, even though they've taken the superficial step of signing up to this convention, which is aimed at least forcing courts to return the kids if they've recently been moved from their home country. But the whole underlying problem to this is not is like I say, it's not that just that Japan was acting kind of as a haven for child abduction by parents, but it's that Japan doesn't have really a family law system. This is the fundamental problem, and this is something that, of course, we hear about the international community because it catches a lot of foreigners off guard. But of course, what happens? Hey, Andrea Moboy, good night. Have a good one. What happens in Japan, of course, is that this happens to everyone divorcing, and although the expectation was in the past, it was a bit like having your family die if you were the non-custodial parent, like you wouldn't see them anymore. And it was, remember, not just kids and mother, it was extended family as well. The idea that you cut ties entirely. I think people, although they might not have liked it, accepted it as it was. But what's interesting is, it's it's very, very slow, small momentum. But a number of parents have started to actually, they've brought a case to the Supreme Court of Japan where they are seeking to find it unconstitutional that the Japanese government hasn't taken action to ensure parental rights in the case of divorce. The absence of a system, they argue, is a violation of the Constitution. It'll be really interesting. I mean, it's really rare for the court to say something like that. Although it did happen with the election system, where the differential in votes, where some rural prefectures, people get votes that are worth like 4, 5, 6 times the votes of people in the cities. So there are times that the Supreme Court has been willing to tell the Parliament that you have to pass laws to fix this sort of thing, and the government's reacted. This is talking about building up a whole system of family law that doesn't exist, so it's actually bigger than that, but the fact that the government really hasn't even started to tackle this, it'll be really, really interesting. It does reflect at least that although it is the international parents that perhaps brought to light that the situation is Japan is the exception. It's not normal to have to suffer through not being able to see your kids if you're divorced. It's good to see that they are looking at this anyway, and it'll be really interesting to see how the court reacts to it. And they'll probably, again, more likely than not, they'll just say it's up to the government to decide, not the courts. Particularly something like this. But if it moves the needle on anything, that'll be pretty interesting. So, Andrea Moboy, CSIRO and Geelong are doing lab work, RA the virus, hopefully a speedy vaccine. Well, speedy vaccines, everyone is saying the scale is months. So, of course, you never know if they could get lucky, but I hope that's the case. In Geelong, I used to live near Geelong. I used to live in Point Lonsdale, so that's kind of cool. This is just a super cool video that I saw the other week. It's on, it highlights, I've just realized all the country names. Well, you can see the flags. The country names are in Japanese. However, you can see on this, above you've got above is total GDP and below is GDP per capita, and it's over 20 years. You can see kind of an animation of how this changes. I wonder if I can get it to show up. I hope I can. I always have trouble getting these to display from this app. Let me just see if I can do something. That is the graphic. and if I can't get it to show, I can't get it to show. But it was really cool. Anyway, it just shows the rise of China and Korea, and how Japan still enjoys a pretty good per capita GDP, but certainly China has certainly grown like crazy in the last, even the last 10 years. It's really shifted a lot, and I found that really interesting. I'm going to move on to the next one, but that was kind of cool. Yeah. So this is kind of interesting. So the big news today, of course, coronavirus. Let's get into that, the COVID-19. First thing is that the big news today is that of this ship, the Diamond Princess, which reminds me of the Pacific Princess, the cruise liner from the TV series The Love Boat, which was on TV a lot as a kid. It always makes me think of that theme song. Except it doesn't look as fun as that. I've never really understood the whole concept of going anywhere on a cruise liner for anything. It strikes me as just sitting in a bigger airplane that goes a lot slower. To me, the more you can minimize the time you are spending moving in an enclosed space, the better. But some people like it, and in this case, yes. So there are something like, what are the total numbers? It's something like 3,500 people are on this boat. About 1,500 are staff and 2,000 are passengers. It's a surprisingly high ratio. And of course, what has been happening, there is a perception that the virus appears to be spreading within the boat. However, I think that's a little bit misleading, because the results are coming back. They tested, first of all, 600 people all at once, and now they've tested up to like 1,500 people on the boat. Basically, anyone who's showing symptoms of anything are the people that they prioritize testing. I assume because in Japan they still don't have the ability to test a lot of people at once. When they announced, hey, it's okay, we only found 10 people, the first 10 people that they found were based on the first 30 results to come back out of 600 people that they tested. The rates of, among the people that they tested now, which is 1,500 people, they found something like 380 people are sick on this boat. Because they are announcing new results every day, it looks like it's spreading, but what's simply happening is that they're testing more and more people. Although that said, some of the staff involved in testing the people on the cruise liner have also become sick, and those involved in transporting them, and those have become domestic cases now. Of course, because the cruise liner has not gone through customs, they're not treating, the government's asking the WHO not to treat these 380 people as being within Japan. And what they've said is, anyone who's sick, they'll take off the boat and take into hospital for treatment. Anyone who is not sick or not confirmed as sick has to go through a two-week quarantine, where if they can stay not sick for 2 weeks, then they will be allowed to get off the boat and enter Japan and go to wherever they're from. Problem being, of course, it's not clear whether the virus is actually spreading on the boat, and whether those 2 weeks are actually helping as part of a quarantine, or if they are actually trapping people in a contagious environment. And it seems that although they're nearly up to 2 weeks, they're about a week and a half into it now, the US government, based on people on the boat saying, can you please get us out of here, has agreed to, and I believe that today and tomorrow they're going to be withdrawing something like 350 passengers that are American that are on the boat, remembering not including the ones who are actually tested positive and are receiving treatment in hospital. But the US is going to fly out all of the American citizens on the boat. I believe that Canada and Taiwan are preparing similar steps. They will be flown over to America, where all of the people having just gone through nearly 2 weeks of quarantine and wanting to be rescued from quarantine are going to be placed into quarantine for another 14 days when they get back to America before they can enter. Arguably, the quarantine in America probably isn't going to be as nice as it is on the boat either, but it's understandable that you want to get home, you want to be somewhere where you have information about what's going on, which a lot of people on the ship don't have. Couldn't even imagine how miserable it is for the people who are in rooms that they are not allowed to leave, but they don't have a window, like internal facing ones. That would be a lot like just a prison cell. I mean, it's a luxury cruise ship, but yes, they're probably going to have to go into similar circumstances back in America, but they'll be back in America. What is interesting now is that there's sort of news that for a lot of people, some people are saying, well, you've taken too long. Now they'll prefer to just wait things out in Japan and leave the ship normally as part of the quarantine here. So it looks like some people are going to turn down the offer of evacuation by the US and get themselves back to America. It seems that the majority of people asked for this, and it's happening. Some people seem to be annoyed that they left it so late, but I was kind of quasi-joking today that perhaps when they realize the cost of getting treated back in America, they'll ask to be sent back to Japan. But yes, that is a thing that is happening. The US government cited the burden on the Japanese authorities for the medical treatment of the people, the medical care. But there again, I mean, given that the update for Japan this week or from the last few days is that it is now clearly spreading in multiple parts of Japan, in Okinawa, Hokkaido, Aichi, Osaka, Wakayama, Tokyo, Kanagawa, Saitama, Chiba. It's spreading now. There are carriers recorded all over Japan now, many of whom it's not clear how they got it. And they have had it and been out walking around, commuting on trains, going to work, driving passengers in taxis, treating people in hospitals. Clearly right now, although the number is still actually a countable number, at least the number of people who have been found, what's clear from it is from the fact that most of the people that now have it don't have any clear path to how they got it, like they haven't been to China or anything like that. Now we're finding cases of them infecting other people. It's pretty much loose in Japan. I mean, this is the conclusion you have to draw. Japan really hasn't, it's had a half-hearted sort of quarantine set up around this. You have to remember as well, Japan has a huge number of Chinese tourists, and this is, given that China itself suppressed any communication or knowledge about this, and people were traveling pretty freely through December and January until things really started. And at the time that the sort of crackdown in China happened, there were plenty of people, both Japanese who had been into China, and of course many Chinese who had come into Japan. In terms of this being a China problem, the government was kind of trying to call it like that. The Tokyo government was saying that they wanted Chinese-based participants in the Tokyo Marathon to please not travel to Japan for it. But to me, that horse has bolted as of the last few days. It's pretty clearly spreading on its own now. So, yes, that is the thing. And, so if the US is evacuating these 350 Americans from the ship because they think Japan doesn't have the capacity to treat 350 people with this virus, we're pretty well screwed because it's spreading. And here's the other thing as well. The ship is at least a good example because, at least for the people who have been tested, you can actually get a really good idea of how the virus operates. And it seems that in 80% of cases, the symptoms are light. In fact, sometimes they don't even show symptoms at all. The only reason that we know that 80% of people don't show very many symptoms on the boat is because on the boat, they all got tested. They had no choice but to get checked. So remember, in Japan, of course, the only people who have come forward and been tested and discovered as having this are people who were very, very sick, who are about 10% of the cases. It seems that, for every sick person, there's probably 10 people not showing symptoms, carrying it around, and it appears to be pretty contagious. There's not much information about it. But, TKO Sam Live, good to see you. I'm probably not wanting to get distracted by what you're saying, so I'm not going to look, but good to have you in the chat there. So yes, asymptomatic, that is the word, DRRB, Dr. RB, good to have you on, as well as DJ Ocardi, good to have you here. So yeah, I mean, look, truth is, it's here, and it's spreading around, probably from that perspective, good from all sorts of reasons to go back to America. And frankly, the extra quarantine in America, well, this is the thing, as of a few days ago, the Olympics said that they weren't considering making any contingencies or any changes to any plans. The Tokyo Marathon that's happening in like 2 weeks from now, they haven't made any contingencies other than asking Chinese people to stay away, which obviously it's a little bit late for that now. There's going to be 40,000 people. They had a marathon run today near Tokyo, and they forced all the runners to wear face masks. So I think, and this is the thing, while China was very China-like in terms of when the disease came out, it was treated as information to be suppressed, and of course the doctors were threatened by the police and silenced and forced to retract that there were sick people and stuff like that, and of course that made everything over there much, much worse. Once of course the authorities got into gear, about a month too late, Fact is, they're able to do things, of course, that no democratic country can do. They can lock everybody in their houses, and they can really crack down and enforce quarantines. And Japan just can't do that. Hey, Bio McNeil, good to see you. Oh, that reminds me. Aaron, Japan has restricted flights, or it's restricted people traveling from Zhejiang and Wuhan and Hebei, the two Hubei, the two provinces that have the worst concentrations. That's not a general restriction yet, but the fact is most people have stopped traveling, Aaron. So that is a thing. But yes, and there are travel advisories out. It's funny, South Korea issued a travel advisory against going to China or Japan. Although I think given that Koreans pretty much stopped coming to Japan for political reasons 12 months ago, that's working for both parties involved. But yes, DJ Karate face masks have less efficacy than East Asians want to believe. Well, even if they don't have very much, I'd still take it over nothing. For the two-way thing, for the people who are coughing and spluttering everywhere, and which are symptoms of this, it suppresses. It's like having a hand over your mouth. I did get a nasty reminder the other day. I was out with my kid, and there was someone behind me. As soon as he got off the train, all the way along the platform, all the way up the stairs, all the way out, walking outside of the station, coughing and spluttering and hoiking and spitting as he was walking along the whole way. And this wasn't like an old guy. This was like a 30-something-year-old guy, Japanese-looking guy. Could have been Asian guy, I don't know, but regular-looking guy, spitting all over the place, who was clearly sick. Honestly, just to make that guy not do that, to physically render them incapable of spitting, put a freaking face mask on. Maybe it's a placebo to the people who are taking it, but I will take it. I will. So yes, Lysander 45. Thank you for correcting. Zhuzhang. Yes, thank you for that. The X, SHI, I can't differentiate. To me, the consonants in Chinese are as hard as the vowels. But Hubei and which I know also pronounced probably just mangled. But yes, the thing is in Japan as well. Of course, the characters are read entirely differently. So yeah, the pronunciations are completely different. Of course, Wuhan, that everyone's been saying in English, is of course Bukan in Japanese, and that's how it's known. But yes, so for Zhejiang, I'm not sure what I don't even know what the Japanese pronunciation is actually. But anyway, so that's the thing. Americans are going home. In terms of the people that have it in Japan and what's been happening with that, I've got a few more links to that in a moment. But basically, it seems that there was a taxi driver. Well, first of all, there was a bus driver, a tour bus driver, and it seems that the bus guide as well was taking a bus of people from Wuhan in December, and contracted it, and went all over Japan and got his mum sick. There's someone in Tokyo. It's not clear how this taxi driver got it, but a taxi driver got it, gave it to his mum. His mum was the person who died. Apparently multiple other contacts with the taxi driver, and people, including other taxi drivers, it seems, have also picked it up. There was a night, those night cruises, like we can have okonomiyaki on the boats in Tokyo. Well, there was a party where somebody had it at that and gave it to other people while at that party. So that's another one. There is a guy in Chiba who was commuting into Tokyo with a fever. That's come out, working at an IT company in central Tokyo. I've hinted a little bit, and I've got this later on, that the whole thing where people work in Japan, the reasons that people work. I know the perception is that companies are just, mean and force them to work, or that people want to be self-sacrificing. There are some other things as well. I mean, it's true, and it does drive me crazy that people, like to sometimes almost show off when they're working, when they're sick. Look at how, dedicated I am to the company, and they get kind of indirect praise, from their bosses and whatnot. Also remember that you don't get sick days off in Japan. Most companies don't grant that. So if you've got 15 days or 10 days vacation per year and you take a sick day off, you're sacrificing your vacation time. And of course, but what's really, I suppose, driving it the most actually is the sense that everyone is always so busy and they've got so much work, and if they take time off, that they'll be further behind, and or they'll cause inconvenience to other people. So it's sort of out of that they put on a face mask, take some medicine and tough it out and go to work. But when you're commuting on especially something in a situation like this, a crowded train, and you're going into work and you're putting everybody on the trains and everybody, at work at risk. Where I am, I do have some say in my own situation now, and I tell people who work, who report to me, if you are able to, if you're sick and you want to work, feel free, but do it from home. In fact, do not come into work. Please take time off. Like, take time, rest, get better. You're no good being sick. So I say that, to me that's common sense, but it's not common sense that I've seen. So, and the fact that people are traveling around with that. There's also cases now in Hokkaido. Apparently, a person who was actually on the Diamond Princess, who got off at Hong Kong and was later diagnosed, which triggered the whole, probably gave it to everyone on the boat. He got off at Okinawa as well, and now there have been cases found in Okinawa. It does seem super contagious from that perspective, especially when you think that it's, most of the time it's not, that the symptoms don't show up very strongly in most people. So yeah, I don't know, I get the feeling we're heading into this being a bit like one of those kind of flus that goes around that unfortunately, don't forget, flu has a pretty high death rate as well, particularly for elderly who get it, and this is a similar sort of a case. It may be that we're moving from this being a situation of trying to stop it coming into the country to more just, kind of hoping it goes through and everybody takes care, and not too many, that there's facilities available for those who catch it really badly. And bear in mind, while it is mostly elderly and people with pre-existing conditions, it's not just that. So it's we'll have to see. But DJ Karate, you live in Seattle. Oh, I get to Seattle every now and then, so that's good to know. It's illegal for employers to question our paid sick days. That's a good law. This is exactly why that's a good law. In New Zealand, I must admit, we'd say take a sickie. People would treat, sick days like, sort of an entitlement to take time off. But I'll tell you, it's obviously, I think, better to accept that than it is to have actual sick people feel like they need to come into work because they're going to get pay docked otherwise. So absolutely. But yeah. So that is some of what's going on. There's some more articles later, but this very cool looking train, which looks a lot like the E7, that is being used in some parts of Japan. This is a test train that is going to be used in Hokkaido when the bullet train gets up to Hokkaido. It's not going to be running, it's currently called Alpha X. It is being used on trial runs. It will be running in Hokkaido in 2030, so 10 years from now, a long way out. But it will apparently operate at speeds of 360 kilometers per hour, which are like in miles per hour for Americans is like Smokey and the Bandit fast. It's crazy. In fact, yes, I don't know, what is 360 kilometers per hour? Is that like 60 miles to 100? So that's like 100, it's like 210, 220 miles per hour. It's pretty fast, and it should be cool. And it should mean that you'll be able to get up to Hokkaido and travel around Hokkaido from Tokyo like in the same time that you get to Fukuoka, like 5 or 6 hours. So there you go. That is a cool thing. Sky Brown, I don't know if you've seen or heard of this girl, but she seems pretty cool. She's got a Japanese mum and a British dad. She's grown up half. She travels, apparently, she spends half the year in America and half the year in Japan. Doesn't seem to have actually much connection to Japan. To UK. However, she is, she lives in Kumamoto, and she's 11 years old, and she's already like a champion professional skateboarder. There's a feature in the BBC talking about her life and education in Japan. She finds Japanese society a little bit too harsh, a bit too strict. So although she was considered as being ready to go to the Olympics because I think they're having it as a demonstration sport, skateboarding this year. She is joining the British Olympic team because she likes the coach, and she seems pretty cool and laid back, which is what she sort of goes for, and I think that's great if it means she's going to come to the competition. Clearly she's got the deeper connection with Japan, but she's not digging the culture so much, it would seem. So that in itself, just the article of her talking about and relating to, in spite of that, I think obviously the parents are very deliberately having her half the year in California, half in Japan. And at the same time as the Japanese school system can be kind of tough, they've also seemed to have let her do a lot of things, and she's got friends as well. I mean, I don't know, apparently just from watching YouTube she learned to do tricks that adults can't do skateboarding. She told a story about a friend who's a surfer who became like a champion pro surfer who she encouraged to surf. Really cool. Anyway, nice to see a half kid doing well. Nice to see also multinational. I mean, in a sense, she's probably got deeper connections with America and with Japan than with UK. But great for UK, and again, great for any country to be able to recognise that you can be all different kinds of people and different backgrounds representing you. And I think this is the same story. I don't know why people are getting so wound up with the idea of Naomi Osaka representing Japan. There were some people I know, even from YouTube, who are complaining a lot about that, saying that she's got more connection with America or whatever. Maybe she does, but she's still Japanese, and this kid is Japanese, and she's also British, even though she's not lived in Britain. And I think it's wonderful for the Olympics and great for Britain that she's representing. And again, cool to see a half that you can hold up as a, and it's the father of a half kid. It's cool to see kids that can sort of inspire, that are cool, that stand out and represent that. This is the guy who was commuting when sick. So this is the classic story that he got really sick. Apparently, originally it started out as the tweet here actually says that he commuted to work for a week with a 40-degree fever and worked until 10 p.m. When you dig into the timeline, that's actually not accurate. Well, he commuted for a week with a fever, but it was 37 and 38 at the end of 1 week. Then at the weekend, then it was 40, and that evening he got tested. But it is true that he did commute into work and spent full long days at work and did overtime, clearly sick, showing symptoms of this virus. He wasn't diagnosed until the fever became over 40, and it was diagnosed as pneumonia. And it wasn't treatable, and they got it tested to figure out why, and they found out that's what it was. It's not clear how he got it. But again, this is the point about I was making before about the idea of Japanese work culture that kind of embraces and encourages and subtly pushes people to feel like they have to come into work even when they're sick. And the result is, if this is as contagious as it appears, it might be but yes, so I just noticed the comments. Lysander 45. Hey, I'm quite happy for Naomi Osaka's Haitian half to win as well. I think that's actually super cool. There's another thing that's super cool. Well, yes, I know that you were quoting the Rising Wasabi, so I shouldn't be taking it too seriously, but I noticed it. But yeah, just in this case, again, it's just kind of infuriating that people either feel like they want to work when they're sick, or that they need to work when they're sick, or somehow they're being more responsible, coming in and getting their work done and sacrificing themselves in spite of being sick. Whatever motivated this person to commute, well, symptomatic, and even if it's not Shin coronavirus, even if it's flu, or if it's just a horrible, clearly you got a fever and you're sick and you're commuting into work. Two things. One, of course, companies are allowing more telework, and they should do that more. From where he's working, it would seem that that's where he is. He should have been an option. But also, if you've got a fever, why are you even trying to work? I mean, my joke is I barely function at 36 degrees, let alone 40 degrees. Like, holy crap. Like, how is anything about that good? So this is something where I think, I did do a tweet which was that when SARS was happening in Singapore, Hong Kong and China, and everyone was sort of realizing one problem was the propensity for a lot of particularly elderly people, not the same in Japan by the way, actually. I mean, maybe not quite as common here, but you do see it here. But the propensity for people to spit in public was something that was seen as a social ill. And not that everyone did it, but a lot of people did it. And what happened was, when it was realized that was actually probably a factor in the spread of SARS, authorities in Hong Kong and Singapore and China really cracked down hard on the behavior. They said this is behavior that, although common, is not acceptable, and we need to stamp out this part of culture. And so they started actually really enforcing really hard, like rules and fines and penalizing people because they realized that they had to change this. And if you ask me, this kind of culture, Japan does have a culture of people working through illness. And I've worked in Japanese companies on open plan seating where you could see every day, you could see like a wave coming of sick people coming toward you, as this idea that they're making everybody sick. And Mr. Gordychep, I think that's exactly what it is. But in Singapore, I think they just put up strong reminders that they'll probably get executed for it. But certainly enforcement got stepped up a lot. But here, I don't know. I tweeted my view that the government has to recognize that there's actually a cultural issue here as well. That the fact that this behavior is kind of normal, and if it's as contagious as it looks, the number of people that it puts at risk, then the government has to sort of, I think, do something like what DJ Okawari was saying. Seattle does. They've got to put it on the companies that if they've got to disincentivize the companies. They've got to get companies to proactively send people home and tell their employees not to come into work if they're sick. The company has to manage the work for the employee, not make the employee feel like they're going to die if if they get behind on their work. So I think that from that perspective, one, I suggested that some kind of an enforcement system, even just making some examples of cases where this happens, where they find out that employees have been into the companies. Don't punish the employees, but certainly make it known to the companies that why didn't you send this person home? Why did you endanger everybody in your work and everybody who was commuting? And I don't know, if you want to put penalties on companies, give them an incentive to if they're not going to do it voluntarily, make some examples, in order to get the sort of society to wake up a little bit. I think if the government seriously wants to do something to try to stop the spreading unnecessarily, it seems that quarantine is almost impossible. But if quarantine is impossible, then you do have to think about, can Japan hold the Olympics in a few months? Because if they're not going to be able to contain the spread of this, then that's going to be a real consideration. It seems to me there are things that Japan could do. Who knows? It might be too late already. But if there are things that can be done, I think that they should be done. So, Quentin Rankin, is it possible this thing will change Japan's work no matter what culture? Sorry, I'm not sure I got that. Is it possible that this thing will change Japan's work no matter what culture? Well, I think it should. I hope it does. The point, if it doesn't, we're all screwed. I mean, this is the point, right? The question is, are people, this is a 10% fatality rate. Are people really going to do this? So, so I think I'm hoping this is something that can address that. I mean, this is something that I see as a problem regardless. Even if you're just talking about regular colds, harmless sort of colds or illnesses, let alone serious ones, but shouldn't be happening anyway, if you ask me. So I'm hoping it can trigger some reflection on that. But we'll see if it does. It might not. If it doesn't, we're all screwed. This is had a little gif of a person. I believe it's El Chapo. Either that or a tiny kid with glasses. But it's cool. I just finished watching Narcos Mexico season 2. It's so good. It's so good. Wow. That whole Narcos series. It's also great. I majored in Spanish at university. So it's kind of nice to actually have something really compelling to watch in Spanish that kind of, although I must admit it wasn't Mexican Spanish, and it sounds like the Mexicans only, like for slang they only use like 3 or 4 words over and over and over, and it becomes the most memorable part of it, but it's still kind of cool. Quint Rankit, if the fatality rate is going to be 60%, well, like I say, we've got the cases from the ship which show that most people are asymptomatic or have really light symptoms, and the majority of people that have bad symptoms or fatalities are people who already have diabetes or elderly or have preconditions. So the idea of it being 60%, numbers will only be showing up like that where they're only testing people who are already very sick. But if they're actually catching everyone that has it, apparently the rates are quite low. There's no point in saying stuff like that. I don't know if you've got a basis for that, but that's, we actually have a cruise liner which is unfortunately becoming like a medical experiment that's showing us the rates. day and age. Imagine if the Olympics are called off. Yeah, well, it's again, I don't know that they'll be called off, but it's kind of hard to see, and they are a ways off, so there still is a chance to do something about this. But at the same time, they're going to have to take some serious measures. And like I say, I mean, the Olympics is often in '64 it was a trigger for a change of all kinds of aspects of the culture. Perhaps the including the sort of work culture. They've got every incentive to try to take extraordinary measures to ensure that it doesn't affect things. So I think it's up to the government if they want to drop the ball on it. Personally, by the way, same with I never left when Fukushima happened. I stayed here the whole time. This is where I live. I'm not going to run away from here if we go into. It couldn't happen here actually, just because they don't have the capacity to do it. But even if we got into like a China-style quarantine situation, I wouldn't leave here. It'd have to be pretty dire, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to leave anyway if it got to the point that it got that bad. But it doesn't appear that bad. Which isn't to say, by the way, clearly pandemics are among the greatest risks to our culture. To humanity, to our species or whatever. I don't know that this is the doomsday. I think this is a bit like the Miyagi earthquake, which was a fantastic, real, scary, and with consequences run for what a direct earthquake on Tokyo is going to be like. It was like that here. I think this is going to be like that as well. There are going to be worse pandemics than this in the future that are going to have high rates, and this is a good chance for us to start to think about, okay, how are we going to deal with those, with a really serious case that we have. So hopefully people are taking notes and really thinking about things. This is my tweet that I mentioned before. During SARS, China realized that public health demanded stamping out the practice of spitting in public, so they cracked down on it with harsh enforcement. Japan needs to do the same on working while sick, impose fines on people that commute with fevers and their company. The more I think about this, I realize people reacted badly and they said it'd be impossible to catch people commuting with fevers, which probably is. Well, you can always find out when people have actually been checked in and then ask if they worked. You can find out that way. You could also put in like infrared cameras and stations and whatnot, but for me the goal is not to catch the people commuting, although that would be something, again, you would want to try to stop that. But to me it's more to make sure that the companies are making sure that even if they want to come to work, that they're prohibited from coming into work. That's where it should really start, and it shouldn't just be for this. So that was the thought. That was the thing about zebra crossings again. Yes, so I was on, of course, a podcast the other week. I mentioned this on Non-Native Creative. It's an awesome series with more episodes coming out every week. Alicia in Tokyo, Alicia has done an awesome job with it. She actually went and later on added apparently transcription and captions and everything to the whole thing. So actually an amazing amount of work. The sound and everything came out really great. There were great questions. There were facts about myself I've never shared before, so it is worth watching. Not just the episode with me, but the whole thing. It's actually really, really well done. Hey, Tech Art 2, good to see you. Christopher Lou, good to see you. And that is the end of the show. Up on time, and look at that, just got to the last one. Just like a Japanese meeting, right on the final minute. There's no efficiency. I was hoping to finish early, as I always do. Maybe play a bit of music, maybe do a Rubik's Cube live on camera, but I will not. I'm going to go to bed, as you all should too. Don't worry, Tech Art 2, the whole thing is recorded, you can watch it. But good to see you all. Thank you for joining once again. Carlos Diamante, good to see you. Link to the podcast, please. I will tweet it. If you're on Twitter, I can retweet the link to it. But yes, look it up. It says one word, non-native creative. In fact, I'm going to type it in right now, so you'll be able to go find it on Spotify, SoundCloud, native creative. Boom, 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 boom. And all good. I am going to leave while I'm on perfect time. So have a good week, everybody, and see you next week. Remember, follow me on Twitter, like if you liked, and peace. Boom, ka kite aloha.